Today I'm speaking with Richard Halliday, Director of Global Marketing at Lumex, who will be discussing some of the products and services Lumex offers. What trends are influencing the optoelectronics industry, and how is Lumex responding to these new developments?
So if you look at what's happening in the optoelectronics industry today, there are two segments really, the status and indication piece and the illumination space. And when you look at the status and indication part of the industry, there are a couple of things that are going on there. One of them is that package size is getting much smaller. The expectation that there is increasing accuracy and consistency for the intensity and color of LEDs. Those things are very important. We're also starting to see some unique wavelengths, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But when you look at the decreasing package size, for example, you've got LEDs now that are packaged devices that are 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, so tiny devices that in some cases can put out RGB and have a great deal of intensities. So in those situations, you're finding people wanting to put smaller and smaller packages into devices that are in fact smaller and smaller. You've got your handheld devices and other things. So that's certainly one piece, is the decreasing package size of LEDs. I think the other thing that gets a lot of attention in our industry is increasing the accuracy and consistency of both the intensity of an LED and the color of an LED. So if you're buying 100,000 LEDs and they happen to be a specific wavelength of blue, you want to make sure that all of those 100,000 are as close to the same wavelength as possible. We call that binning in the industry. And so I think that is increasingly important. And what you have today is, what Lumex does is, has automated equipment that, as that product is coming off the line, it is actually tested extensively into a number of different bins, so that when the customer gets the product, ultimately what they're getting is a product that is very, very consistent. And the equipment that's available today to do inline testing has progressed dramatically. So what that means is that if I have a Bluetooth headset that has a blue LED to indicate connection, that should look identical to someone who is in, say, Florida or in California. The other piece of it is intensity. What we find a lot of customers doing now is taking LEDs and putting them in arrays where you can have anywhere from a couple of LEDs next to each other that might be the same color, all the way to, we've got arrays that are several 100,000 LEDs. So in that case, you really need the consistency to be there with the color, but you also need it to be with the intensity, because it's very obvious to the human eye, even when you have only slight differences in intensity, the human eye can often pick those up very easily. So again, equipment is available in the industry today that allows you to check for those things and make sure that LEDs that are of the same intensity and of the same color bin end up going to a single project. So we see a lot of that. That's a pretty big deal in the industry today in status and indication. I think the other thing that is pretty interesting is unique wavelengths. We're finding increasingly that for pushing the spectrum a little bit and finding individual wavelengths that are good for specific things. So we have customers that are looking for purple LEDs, which are not particularly common. And these might be, again, simply for status and indication. But in other cases, you've got unique wavelengths for things like wound therapy. You've got things for agricultural growth stimulation. There's a certain wavelength that is perfect for growing tomatoes. And other wavelengths sort of in the near IR that are for specialized machine vision systems for seed counting or grain counting. And then you've got other wavelengths that are good for things like sterilization. So there's a number of things that we're seeing in the optoelectronics industry that when you start to do R&D and then you start to work with customers, you find that certain wavelengths are good at very specific tasks. So that's another trend that's happening, certainly, is we're identifying more and more wavelengths that have a specific application. The other piece of the optoelectronics industry is lighting, and this is having a massive impact. Lighting is the fastest growing space in the LED market. It is also, at the moment, one of the smallest spaces, but that is changing incredibly quickly. The compounded annual growth rate of the lighting market is enormous, somewhere between 20 and 30%. So the things that are driving that are really bulb replacement. People are trying to move away from complex fluorescence and fluorescent lighting in the office space, as well as in residential. And some of the things that are affecting LEDs there are LED manufacturers and lighting companies are having to become experts in things like thermal management, optics. They need to be very aware of other components that may be outside of their realm of comfort, like capacitors, because the capacitor is a device that can often fail before the LED does. And so if you aren't using the appropriate other electronic components, then you may have a device that's not as robust as the core components like LEDs. The other thing, again, that's really important in bulb replacement is intensity, and then, of course, the color matching and color rendering. If you look up at your ceiling in your office today, you'll notice that the fluorescent lighting is probably different colors within each little bay. One of the things that LED lighting is trying to do is really to match those as closely as possible and get them as close to natural sunlight as possible, because I think that's extremely important. So that's another thing that is influencing the lighting part of the optoelectronics industry. The other thing that really is coming to light is customizable options for lighting. You're no longer bound necessarily by a bulb. What we find at Lumex is that we are doing about 90% of our lighting solutions are customized, where the customer says, I want the space to be illuminated in this way. We come up with some creative and alternative ways, whether it's using light panels or some system integration in order to get the right optics and that sort of thing. We really try to, think outside the bulb and really try to deliver the light experience that they want the end user to see, but it tends to be not just a bulb replacement. So that's another thing that's affecting lighting. And then finally, there's a bit of brand differentiation. One of the things that LEDs have a great capacity to do is to separate one product from another, one system from another, and they do that with a variety of ways that I've mentioned, like unique colors, unusual shapes, in some cases flexible and malleable devices. So those things are really a lot of the trends that are affecting the optoelectronics industry, and Lumex is certainly at the forefront of that. We've got some of the smallest packages in the industry. We do a great deal of R&D with unique wavelengths. I mentioned our inlining equipment that allows us to sort by color and intensity, and in the coming year we will have a whole array of lighting products that are bulb replacement. So that's really what's affecting the industry today, and Lumex is responding.
Thanks, Richard. That was very informative. For more information on Lumex, please visit www.lumex.com, or for ordering information, please visit www.onlinecomponents.com.